It is a mission unchanged. From boots to gym equipment, vehicles to forklifts, and computers to helicopters, the disposal professionals with the Defense Logistics Agency Disposition Services have received it all. Through 5 full decades, they've tended to the reverse logistics needs of U.S. warfighters and partner nations around the globe. And while the methods, tools, and technologies used for property disposal consistently improve over time, the organization never forgets its history as it looks forward to its future. DLA Disposition Services, reflecting on our past to build our future. DLA Disposition Services is a major subordinate command, or MSC, under the Defense Logistics Agency, the nation's combat logistics support agency. What led to the creation of DLA Disposition Services goes back to World War II. Once the U.S. fully engaged in war, domestic production expanded dramatically, and as the war declined, vast amounts of excess supplies clogged U.S. seaports and military installations. The Surplus Property Act of 1944 allowed for the disbursement of unneeded goods and equipment to a state political subdivision of a state or tax-supported organization. A patchwork of agencies and regional authorities emerged to help distribute the excess equipment. When the Defense Supply Agency was created in 1961, the agency inherited the Defense Logistics Services Center, located in Battle Creek, Michigan. About 10 years later, the Defense Property Disposal Service joined DLSC in Michigan.
It was Defense Supply Agency, DSA, but it was DELC, Defense Logistics Services Center. And I started February 4th, 1963. And I was hired in as a clerk typist, a GS3. I made $3,760 a year. I was assigned to Key Punch. And it was largely a male-populated organization. And in fact, they had even a women's auxiliary that the women could join that were working to be with the wives of all the managers and stuff.
We occupied the tower building, and this building was occupied by the 6th Army Corps and Office of Civil Defense Management.
I remember, especially during the Vietnam, that was the early years, it was called the EPL, the Excess Personal Property Listing. And we had a number of employees that sat in a room and took telephone calls from the services and what items they would want out of that. And that was reutilization. Nothing was computerized at that time.
In 1972, Arkansas Senator John L. McClellan chaired congressional subcommittee hearings that reviewed the performance of DoD's surplus property mission. The document cited numerous deficiencies or weaknesses in the inventory and accountability of our wholesale military supply systems. In response to those recommendations, the Defense Property Disposal Service was created September 1972 and inherited the surplus sales and property reuse missions from Defense Logistics Services Center. DPDS grew to a workforce of nearly 6,000 and quickly assumed management of a mix of more than 300 former Army, Navy, Air Force, and combined property disposal sites located at or near installations for renaming as Defense Property Disposal Offices.
I saw the first computer come to our directorate. It was on Texas Instrument, and we had one computer, one little personal computer sitting on a desk that no one would touch.
I worked with DLA Disposition Services for a little over 40 years, all in Battle Creek. I was 20. My father said I would no longer be covered by insurance. And so he said, you have to, if you want to pursue a job, which I had 3 part-time jobs, He said, go find a career with benefits. I was the GS2 temporary clerk typist in our human resource directorate. So my job was basically I typed JOAs, job offer announcements, all day long, and then shredded documents all afternoon.
I started as a supply clerk in the Directorate of Cataloging in the Operations Division, and we had large tub files of the DD-146s, which were descriptions and stock numbers, and I was pretty much responsible for stamping the stock numbers on the cards, and then we would file them in the tub files on the third floor.
The fall of 1980, and my business teacher asked me if I was interested in perhaps qualifying for a student aid position at the Federal Center, and it was called the Stay in School program. It was for at-risk youth from lower income families, and I qualified. For every proposal, whenever we had a solicitation closing, the offers would submit hard copy packages, and sometimes their proposals would be like that thick.
In 1985, the organization's name changed to Defense Reutilization and Marketing Service, or DRMS, and field locations became Defense Reutilization and Marketing Offices, or DRMOs. During the organization's 25 years as DRMS, it was considered a DLA primary level field activity and continued providing the military with services for the disposal of material no longer needed for national defense. Government auctioneers held local sales at DRMOs through bid or live auction, with items often sold in smaller quantities that might appeal to local buyers.
I have worked for DLA Disposition Services, which started out as Defense Realization and Marketing Service, for 33 years. And when I started, everything was done manually. And we would basically take everything off a document and then go to the key punch card machine, which had the big clunky keys, and we'd punch everything out in the 80 card column format, which is being used today through the mill strip process. That has never, ever changed. It remains the same.
I've been in the government 33 years. 29 of those have been with DLA. I started as a wage grade 5, driving a forklift, stowing the property, releasing the property, loading trucks. So an opportunity came open to be an auctioneer, because back then, Disposition Services did their own auctions, and we had our own auctioneers. Back in the day, they would write a catalog, and then we would advertise what we were selling. Customers would come in, and just like you'd go to an estate sale nowadays or a regional auction, we would auction each item individually, just like the same auctioneers you see on TV or those estate type of sales.
As the pace of technological change accelerated in the 90s, the end strength of the organization began to recede, coinciding with post-Cold War drawdowns and base realignment and closure orders. Property receipt systems started going online, and new automated tools and increased computing power allowed specialists to accomplish more. As an early adopter of the World Wide Web, DRMS laid a strong foundation for greater customer reach with the creation of a searchable online property database that eventually morphed into its reutilization, transfer and donation, and sales web pages, which allowed for online bidding.
When you were brought in into the program, it was a GS7 Target 11. I'm currently a GS13, one of the old timers now. We did target marketing, we did advertising, we did cold calling, we did all those type of advertisements. And then moved into, when I was doing marketing advertising, met with the guys. It was Scott Riddle and Rod Muskin at the time, but we did the internet.
In the early 90s, Disposition Service was trying to promote itself to its customers to do things more cost-effective. We stumbled across this thing called web technology. So we were talking to different universities that were kind of involved in the development of this technology. And we stumbled across the University of Switzerland that actually had the software we could download.
Everything was done by hand. But we knew that this technology would be a great way to get to our customers. At the time, this was before Google, this was before any type of eBay, even Internet Explorer. was even in existence at that time.
And right after we got it running, we realized its potential. With the color, the pictures, the text that we could actually show on the screen, we were one of the first on the internet to have a searchable database online.
Desert Storm brought in a new era for the organization as they faced fresh challenges with providing support not only to customers in the United States, but also to the U.S. military in a conflict zone.
With Desert Storm, I was a new contract specialist. I saw an impact on disposition services and DLA as a whole. We had been providing support to customers predominantly more at home in times of peace. And so our level of contracting support grew exponentially. And so some of the challenges for us was how can we provide the warfighters what they need, when they need, but still be legally compliant. And so being able to go with the changes and bring in that flexibility was key. So that's something, and now it's pretty common day that we have OCONUS support, as we're a global footprint.
From the aftermath of the Gulf War until the start of Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan, DRMS was essentially halved. Its physical infrastructure shrank from more than 200 field sites to about 100, and manpower contracted from nearly 4,000 full-time employees to less than 2,000. Reductions took place even as the remaining workforce continued to process millions of customer turn-ins, originally worth tens of billions each year, and ensure that controlled property was dealt with responsibly.
When I started in 1984, our agency was almost 6,000 strong, and we had 180 sites worldwide, most of them full service. And as the business morphed and changed, we downsized. We are now about 1,500 approximately, and we have very few full service sites in our agency. But we're still doing the same thing.
More demands followed in the new millennium. Lengthy conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan brought heavy deployment responsibilities for expeditionary personnel. For the first time, overall direction for DRMS became the responsibility of a senior executive service civilian. Private contract firms began executing the agency's public sales. A higher demand for transfers and donations arose from customers in law enforcement, firefighting, state and municipal government, and humanitarian and disaster relief organizations. In 2010, DRMS became DLA Disposition Services.
I've been with the government for 39 years, 11 months. I went over to Iraq in 2010. We had the reserve units there, and we also had the third country nationals there. They were actually doing a lot of the demill, the cutting up the Humvees and the demill property. And one of the good things that we had over there that we don't have here, you had these crushers, and they would crush and maul the scrap. Oh, that was amazing.
I started work for Disposition Services in 1986. I was going to the local community college, Kellogg Community College, and I was taking just some business classes. And at the time, DRMS had a need for a stenographer. I deployed in 2012 to Speicher, Iraq, and then in 2014 to Bagram, Afghanistan. A little bit different operations in both. In Speicher, Iraq, we as civilians and the crew that were there, we did the physical work and the labor. So we did the receiving of the property from them. We did screening, and if there were demill property, we did the physical cutting of that material and the scrapping of that material. In Bagram, Afghanistan, we had contractors that did that, I would say, that heavy work for us.
We went to Bagram, Afghanistan. There's not a site, there's not anything. We're living in wooden bee huts, 20 by 40 wooden bee huts. And the lead individual that knew about sites and such, his back went out. Within a month, his back went out. So that left myself and another individual. He was a GS7 that was very, very experienced as far as sites are concerned. Forklift driver, really knew that kind of thing, but not the other. So we just started pulling out the manual. We went page by page and we figured it out. And when we opened the gates to say, hey, here's DRMO Bagram and we're open.
Our support through the Humanitarian Assistance Program was to the Afghan civilians. And when I mean civilians, it was not just anybody, it was orphanages, schools, it was projects. They had to meet a certain criteria as determined by the State Department. None of the property went to the Afghanistan military because they got it through Foreign Military Sales Program.
With the Law Enforcement Support Office, or the LESO program, I was there for approximately 8 years, and that program dramatically evolved. It was a program that DLA Disposition inherited, and it's been around since 1991.
And the majority of the property that law enforcement receive from DLA Disposition Services are common items. Anything you can buy at a store off the shelf. It offsets their budget, it helps the whole community, and there's a rigorous application process that they have to get the military-type property.
We were doing a compliance review. We showed up, and the police chief just started off saying how he loves me and he loves the program, and he took me to an armored vehicle that he got through the LESO program that he pulled up on a normal routine call, and someone opened up fire with him on an AK-47. And it saved his life. He normally takes a patrol car. He had no idea why he took the armored vehicle on that call, and he was just very grateful. And that really hit home to me and the folks I was with.
As the country moved deeper into the new millennium, no one could predict the missions that would give the team at DLA Disposition Services another opportunity to show their skills and expertise.
And then on top of Harvey, hit the other 3 hurricanes right after it. So we were busy, and we would work till late at night, sometimes 10 o'clock at night, sometimes midnight. That's not uncommon. What happens is if a field site comes in with items that we need, because we'll send out items needed. The field site comes back and we'll go check with the customer, say, do you need it? If yes, they bring it on record. Well, as soon as they bring it on record, we must put that order in after 5 p.m. each day when the inventory updates.
When the pandemic first hit, masks were in short supply, so we pulled masks back from one of our sales contractors. We froze those items, pulled them back, and so they got into the right hands and helped DLA with that relief effort.
People think the downsizing was just recently. Actually, the big downsizing was in 2013 and 2014. Where the amount of property that we were moving out there was about 3 million pounds a week. It was sold to local companies within Afghanistan. The big thing there is you don't want to flood the market, but you want to stimulate the market with those recyclable type of materials.
Looking back, it's easy to see how collective lessons learned from hundreds of deployments have shaped a workforce that now has a keen sense of how to operate far away from the traditional office while still helping military and whole of government customers.
And if you look at the last 25 years, we average about 3 million receipts a year. That hasn't changed. What's changed is the technology and the criticality of the type of property that we receive, and the efficiencies that we found over the years using technology to receive that type of property.
I think of Defense Property Disposal Services, Defense Realization and Marketing Services, DLA Disposition Services. Powerful names. They got that way through an excellent reputation, which is based upon the work that people have done since 1972. And every single worker should feel good about what they do, and they should have a positive attitude and know that they make a difference in the world.
If its first 50 years have revealed anything, it's that the team at DLA Disposition Services is resilient, dedicated, and ready to adapt to support any mission. DLA Disposition Services, reflecting on our past to build our future.